good, people? Welcome to Who Knows It's Just Life, the podcast. I'm your host, Kyle. Thank you for fitting me into your day today. On today's episode, I want to focus on Black August and really just my August in general. It's been a crazy month, to be honest. A lot has been going on. And for me, it was a big month of kind of revisiting parts of myself that I hadn't really been channeling as much recently. I've really in the last several years. So I want to get into that a little bit too. But yeah, first and foremost, it's the very end of August now and school is back. So I know, my son's going into the second grade and is back in person, which I think is good. I think they have a lot of, quite a few safety measures to make sure things stay safe. It's awkward though, because I can't go into the building anymore, which is it's weird now. Not being able to go in the building, it's weird, and I realized how much it was great to be able to walk in the building and see the staff and drop them off in front of the classroom, because that's what I used to do. At least back when he was in kindergarten, that's what I used to do. So yeah, it's a bit of an adjustment. They have this whole outside process of having the kids come into the school, which is a little weird. It's nice when the weather isn't too bad, but not sure how it's going to work when the weather is crappy, but maybe it'll be smoothed out later on. But yeah, I'm glad he's back in the school. I'm worried about how it's going to go socially. There might be some challenges. I'm sure all the kids are going to be adjusting and all that's going to be, I'm not sure what's ahead of us, but I think it's a necessary shift. Sounds like things are safe enough, I think, to be able to do this. And I think they're going to be testing the kids, they're going to be testing staff and stuff like that. There's a number of things they're doing to try to make sure things are safe. So I'm happy about that. What's weird though is that I have a commute now again for the first time since I don't know in months, I guess. So the job right now is remote, and I'm blessed and thankful for that. One of the downsides of, and I remember this when COVID first hit, one of the downsides of the quarantine situation was that I wasn't driving, and everybody's like, why would you miss your commute? And it's like, I was crushing audiobooks and podcasts at the time, when I was driving. So that was an adjustment I had to kind of figure out when I was going to get some listening into podcasts and audiobooks, without the commute. So that was a bit of an adjustment, especially now working from home. But, getting back into driving him to school is fun. We had a couple of rituals, a couple of years ago now, where we used to listen to either a podcast for kids or music or whatever. So fun to get back into that with him, and I get to get back into some good listening for my own edification as well. What else in August? Just in terms of updates. So in August, traditionally, I do a family trip with my mom's family. We all go up to Rhode Island. My mom's family is all in Rhode Island, as you heard in the episode with her. And she mentioned the beach house trips and stuff that we did when I was a kid. That's basically stuck, my whole life, essentially. We might have missed a couple years when I was a professional. Not everybody had the money and space to do it based on where people were at. I don't know. Maybe I missed a year, maybe two. I can't remember, but I feel like it's something I've done my whole life. And as my mom mentioned, it's something that my grandparents, footed the bill for the most part, while everybody had families and everything. And now that myself, me and all my cousins are grown for the most part, couple still in college, but basically, we all kind of pitch in and kind of do our part to kind of keep it alive. We have a cousin's house, and we have, my mom and other family have a house nearby and whatever. So we're basically just blessed and thankful to be able to keep that tradition alive and, do some fun stuff there. So, Rhode Island was a blast. It was a lot of fun being there. The highlight, there was many highlights actually. One of the highlights was the ability to play tennis in the Tennis Hall of Fame, which I posted on Instagram. That was awesome. I grew up going to the house in the back of that picture on Instagram. The White House was a house my granddad owned, and it's just a figment of my memory growing up. And obviously for my dad, he literally grew up there, and so. And I remember, we used to sit on the back porch every once in a while because the Newport Jazz Festival had some stuff that would happen at the Tennis Hall of Fame. So we would just listen to the music for free because we were so damn close, right across the street. So that was always part of, that's part of how I remember summers as a kid. So it was real cool. My aunt, who plays tennis, I think she actually coaches tennis for her middle school students. So she's a big tennis player, and so she booked time for us to play at the Tennis Hall of Fame, and it was just surreal. But the court we happened to be placed in was right under the watchful eye of 22 Freebody, which is the house my granddad owned. Now, of course, he sold the house around, probably about 20 years ago. And so the house is no longer in the family, which is kind of a sore spot. But, regardless, it's still there in memory. And anyway, so it was dope to be able to play tennis, with that building right looking at me. It was just super, super cool to do that. But yeah, the kid had a great time. It was a blast. Yeah, it was just a good time being in Rhode Island, and it always is. So that's cool. But yeah, so I want to get into Black August a bit because it's something that I honestly was ignorant about, and I've known about it, but super peripherally, and I never really understood what it really was. And this year was the first year that I really kind of poured into it and really kind of got into it. And I got into it a little late, and I didn't really do any kind of fasting. One thing I did do, and I guess this could fit in as an update too, is that I'm doing the Spartan Stadion race in DC at Nationals Park. It happens to be on September 11th. So August, I'm sitting there like, oh, okay, I need to start if you've heard the show in prior episodes, like I do try to exercise, work out, like at least be active every day or multiple days a week. And so I coming into August, I'm like, okay, this race is coming up. Let me actually start working out, whatever. And part of Black August is about discipline and exercise and study and things of that nature. And so kind of just with that race coming up, I did, pick up the effort, and I was in front of I was actually challenged to run a mile a day for the first time in my life. I'm not a runner, but anyway, so that was something that I started doing while I was in Rhode Island, and it kind of stuck the rest of the month. So part of the spirit of Black August in terms of the discipline of exercise, I definitely took to, and that was a little bit before even realizing that was a big thing about Black August. Didn't do the fasting or anything like that, and looking back, I can't wish I did something I didn't know about, but I'm definitely going to try to incorporate more of that into my commemoration of Black August in future years. And I also want to delve into more of George Jackson's writings. I've been in classrooms. So Dr. Jared Ball, somebody I mentioned before, I was a student of his at the University of Maryland, and so I've absorbed some of George Jackson's material just through Dr. Jared Ball and others at University of Maryland, Solomon Kamanjang and the Brewer Cultural Center and others. I never read from cover to cover any of George's books. So I definitely want to do that more intentionally. And obviously I don't have to wait till next August to do that, but that's something that if I don't by next August, I'll definitely pull out one of those and, really study that and have that be part of what I do for Black August next year. I do want to shout out the Let's Talk Bruh book club because they did have George Jackson, Blood in My Eye as a book. So I did actually touch on some of George's writings earlier in the year thanks to that book club. So, but yeah, next year it'll be more intentional and more comprehensive. But yeah, I just think that. So for what I was going to say was that like Black August for me, I thought Black August was about Black capitalism, and that's so gut wrenching to admit that. But this is a show. It's called Who Knows Is Just Life, right? It's about not knowing and learning. Okay, so I'm admitting that I had a woefully ignorant perspective on what Black August was, and I think I thought it was affiliated with like, Black Wall Street and just like, upward mobility and that kind of thing and supporting Black businesses. Like that's the impression I had for some years. And that also speaks to the other part of what I want to address is that I have been out of movement and activist spaces for a long, long time. And I was heavy into that in college. And after graduating as an engineer, I was like, well, let me go ahead and work as an engineer and pay off these loans and some other things. But so I was in corporate America for like forever, basically. And now I really want to get back into working with people, for people, for the people, movement work and stuff like that. And I'm just getting my toes back into it. And I mean, I have a lot to learn, but I have a lot of energy still. And I have a lot of, I have some corporate skills that can hopefully apply somehow. I'm hoping, in any way that I can help, I'm just trying to find avenues to support and help with the movements that people have been doing for years. And generations, to be honest. So yeah, this was a big month from that perspective, because I really want to, tap back into that. So anyway, I started getting involved with this group called Urban Temple out of DC. And I originally met some of the leaders there back in April. And I think I might have mentioned that when in an episode back earlier in the year. But anyway, this summer I really started getting more involved with them. And they had a series of Black August events, which was dope. I couldn't attend all of them because some of the travel conflicted with a couple of the dates. But they had a dinner later in the evening on one Saturday, and then what just happened was the pilgrimage. They do an annual pilgrimage to Richmond, Virginia, and this was definitely an amazing experience. I'm gonna talk a little bit about that later, because one thing I do want to say first and foremost is that I have studied up on Black August. I have learned much more about what it is about. And I'm definitely no expert, so I don't want to speak it here as though I'm an expert, but I watched some content. One of the things I watched was Black Power Media, which is, Jared Ball's affiliated with them. They had a piece about Black August on at the beginning of the month, and they've had a couple of other talks about it since at later times in the month. So that's been a gateway piece for me to really reacclimate what this month is about. It's a commemoration. It's not a celebration. It's focused on political prisoners who specifically died trying to free themselves and others, folks who were wrongly convicted of certain like small offenses, but also in just the violent nature of the prison and the carceral system, and specifically George Jackson and the Soledad brothers being convicted, or not convicted, but accused of killing a white prison guard and all that, and Jonathan Jackson's attempt to free them and everything and everything else. All of that is really what Black August is about. It's truly commemoration. And I already mentioned, and they were talking about that the Black Power Media show that they did was kind of taught me that it's about fasting, it's about commemoration, it's about discipline and study and those types of things. So, I really appreciated that work to kind of, re-educate me or educate me onto as to what it truly is about. And I'm going to try to do a better job of commemorating those efforts next year. So the pilgrimage to Richmond, Virginia was extremely impactful for me. I didn't know what to expect going in there. We drove separate cars. I went with my man Kenny, his kids, and another sister in the group, Nova. So we rode down there together, and that was a lot of fun. Just the ride itself was cool. The first stop was at Mass African Burial Ground, right on the water there, where a lot of African folks were buried after coming on the ship. If folks were dropped off, whatever, if they didn't make it right then, this was a place where a lot of Africans were buried. And also it was also a place where a lot of gallows were put up, later on at later points of enslavement. as an executioner, as a place for executions of enslaved people and stuff like that. So it kind of had it's a very, very solemn place. And so there were some commemorative monuments and plaques there to kind of center us and to educate us about that space. And that space actually was fought for too. That space was a parking lot, and the university across the street, I can't remember which one it was now, but they fought to keep it a parking lot. And thankfully, organizers, knowing what that site was, knowing the gravity of that site and the historical meaning of that site, they fought to keep it from becoming a parking lot for the university. And it's nicely manicured. It's all grass. There are still light poles up there, which is interesting, but it's nicely manicured grass. It looks more like what it should be, but it's still way understated. Like if you thought of any other mass grave or any other spot of significant commemoration for any group of people, like it's super understated. Like the park, like you just pull over on the side of the road, you would drive right past it if you didn't know it was there. This is one thing about reparations that I think we really need to include, which is something that that NARC talks about a lot, is having commemorative spaces and having markers for, one thing is having markers for lynchings and mass uprisings and other things like that. But having this be more of an officially, designated space where people driving past know what that is, and having that just be part of the fabric of, the town of Richmond, that particular area of Richmond. These types of things need to be more in the forefront. And again, I keep saying this, it's like, this is part of the problem of the country. Like we're not telling an honest history. The story we tell about the United States is not accurate. So then the next part of the pilgrimage was we linked up with the Alegba Folklore Society, which does a very dynamic and powerful tour through Richmond, a lot of which follows the city of Richmond calls it the Slave Trail, but we always try to reframe that language and say the trail of enslaved Africans. So the Alegba Folklore Society took us through that journey. We stopped at the Capitol building, which is extremely extremely historical for multiple reasons. I mean, it was where the 1705 slave codes were written and codified, back before Virginia was, or before the United States was a thing. So it was definitely a pivotal. It was a precedent-setting building in terms of legislation around dealing with enslaved Africans and things of that nature. So it's historical from that perspective, and obviously it was also the capital of the Confederacy when the Civil War broke out too. So Richmond has a lot of history, and even just the topography. They were talking about how the Capitol is high up on a hill, and you can look down and literally see the land upon which enslaved Africans were being brought onto the occupied United States shores. So that was part of the tour. Then was probably the more impactful piece, which just really got me. There's the actual, again, Richmond calls it the Slave Trail, whatever. There's an actual trail that starts where slaving ships would disembark folks, from the ships from the Middle Passage. And this is the part where the enslaved Africans would have to walk from there to either a holding cell at night, or they would be marched right to the auction block, basically. And they described that this took place at night. And it was a very moving period of time, because while they spoke through this history, we did some meditation, some breathing, some commemoration, and just really calling on the ancestors to to be present with us in that moment. And then what they did was they lined us up and they had us go through part of the walk as though we were enslaved. And it was very benign in terms of what we had to go through. And it's just amazing how pivotal it was nonetheless. What they did was they had the men in the line in front, and they put a rope around our waist, very loose. It wasn't tight or anything, but we had to hold the rope around our waist, and then it also went to the next person behind us. So the men were first, then the boys, then the girls, and then the women last. And the brother who was leading this portion of the tour took on the persona of a driver, as they call them. Which is to say, a white man who was leading us as the enslaved off of the ship towards the auction blocks or the holding cell or whatever. And I mean, it was terrible. My man was in the front, and I mean, I was two people behind him, and I was the third in line. So I was one person behind him, and I could feel his resistance to the driver. The driver would say, "Boy, go, boy, stop," or whatever. And it was just tough, yo. It was just tough. And we us in the front, we couldn't see anything else. We could hear him say, "Oh, 15 lashes for you for putting your hand down," or 15 lashes for you for dropping the rope, or whatever. Like, he was like, you didn't know who he was talking to. He could have been talking to another man or children or a woman. You know what I mean? And we were ignorant. If we tried to turn around, he would yell at us, and it And he would just be taunting. He was like, "Oh, I know Master so and so would love these young gals," blah 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 blah. Like he was just being as offensive as he could be with it, which I don't know. And it was real to an extent. What the actual experience was like was even worse. I mean, obviously, right? I mean, like I said, what we went through was benign. I mean, the folks were clasped with metal collars, metal restraints on hands and wrists, wrists and ankles. And obviously, if it was a particularly hot night or a cold night, like that metal is going to reflect that temperature and either burn you or freeze you out. And at the day we happened to be doing it happened to be like a 95-degree day. Granted, it's in the middle of the day, but it was just rope. Obviously, it's not nothing like that. But damn, like, can you imagine being bound by something that's literally burning your flesh or freezing your flesh if it were cold, and being barefoot walking through this path, and it's at nighttime. And I actually chose to do it barefoot. I kept my shoes off because I wanted to feel the earth with my feet, and I want to do more of the path that way. We went, I don't know how long we went, probably like a quarter mile, maybe a half mile, probably a quarter mile, and we turned off, to exit. And the path, I think in totality, is at least 3 miles long or something like that. I don't know. I just want to do more of it. I want to do more of it, and I want to be very intentional about that experience. And the other factor that would make the real experience even more traumatic is just the fact that the language being spoken, directing the expectations and whatever else, is a language we as enslaved Africans had never heard before. Or if we've heard it, we don't understand it. I mean, we would have heard it a little bit, prior to and on the journey here and all that, but we don't know the language. So I thought it would be interesting if the Legba Folklore Society would start it off like speaking some different language that they pretty sure we don't know, just to kind of emphasize the language barrier first and foremost. But yeah, it was just it was rough. It was very grounding to go through that experience, and like I said, I could feel my man like up in front. He was resisting. Like there was a time where he what the dude said, boy, go. And he waited for like seconds, and the seconds felt like minutes. And it was like, yo, bro, just go, man, just go. But it was like a slight resistance, but not a resistance to the point where, you know, it became an issue. But it was just crazy. And then the dude who took on the role of the driver, he went far ahead at one point. And like I said, I couldn't see behind me, but it took my mind probably a minute or minutes to realize this dude is not even here. Like, why am I still complying with these instructions? Like, there's no threat of whips. And honestly, he wasn't really whipping anybody anyway, but it's just a verbal, like, so for me, it was just amazing how fast the mind can be coerced into certain behaviors, and how behaviors can be normalized, especially through the threat of violence, right? Like, human beings are extremely malleable, moldable, and I experienced that to a degree in that moment. And the debrief was also, so we debriefed afterwards. It was you know, emotional. It was very interesting to hear all the different people's perspectives. And in the shuttle on the way back, one of the sisters was saying how powerless they felt being in the back. The women, they could see the babies, they could see the children, they could see us, but nobody was watching them. And it was very obvious that the white folks doing this were intentionally thinking about every possible way to break the human spirit of those going through this experience. So the men were taken out of a role of protection by being in the front. They couldn't see anything about their children or women or anything. Women were completely exposed, and at worst they were tortured by watching whatever was taking place ahead of them, knowing that they were powerless and they were not protected. And the babies in the middle, like they were just in the middle of that, and you know, couldn't see their mothers, you know, or aunties or whatever. So yeah, and so the tour continued. They brought us to the one of the spots on the canal where they did the auctioning and whatever, and they talked through some things. Coincidentally, at this part of the tour, they had the other folks in Richmond were doing other tours, and it was a bunch of white people, and they had a guy driving a boat who was dressed in like colonial garb, and you know, one of the sisters with us was like, I wonder what they're hearing about Richmond history. And it was just kind of like it was kind of funny, but it was also kind of not, because again, this is what part of the problem, the story that we tell about the United States and all that. So yeah, I don't know. I do know it was a powerful experience overall. Oh, and then one of the last steps was like a monument that they had for like reconciliation or whatever, which was some bull, because, you know, as we talk about with reparations and stuff, it's about those who were victimized have to agree to the terms of the repayment or the reconciliation or whatever. So whatever monument this is, you know, that doesn't do a damn thing in terms of truly healing the experience of slavery, the legacy of enslavement, and all of that. So it was kind of it was kind of a slap in the face to like see that and be like, really? Like that's how we've closed this chapter. Obviously we know it's not closed, but you know, you could tell that was the attempt. So I don't know. So that was a huge moment. And I really give props to the Elegba Folklore Society for doing that. It was an amazing activity, and I really encourage folks to do it. And actually, one of the brothers and I on the shuttle were talking about it as well. We were saying that we think, I was saying that he had the thought, if we had the same thought at the same time, we were like, yo, white people should have to do this. And I was saying, yo, white people should have to do this, and they should have to take turns being the driver, because not only do they need to not only do they need to share in the experience of those enslaved, they need to understand that their lineage is of the driver, right? Now, obviously, not every white person descends from a driver, a slave owner, or whatever. I know that's not necessarily the case, but they need to understand that the person with their complexion in history was that driver, and they need to understand both sides of that coin, because ultimately they were the ones in power and they were the ones that made that be the thing in this country. And I think that has to be part of it for white people. Like I'm not going to say every black person needs to go through that. Black people have experienced traumas, and we've experienced things in our own right? Like, so what I will say is that white people do need to do it, because we already know this isn't taught well enough in history classes, much less for white people, much less in predominantly white spaces. That's just, I just know that's not happening. You can see with this reaction to the whole critical race theory or whatever that nonsense is. Like, not that the critical race theory is nonsense, but just the fact that this is even a discussion about like really what is the honest telling of American history. Anyway, I digress. Props to the Alegba Folklore Society for doing that. One thing I want to acknowledge, though, is that like it was really hard to leave that space and look at white people. And I'm mixed, right? So it was just difficult, like to know that white people, like, so, and this came to mind because, like, later on in the tour, there was a group of white people and they were kind of acting like, silly or just, carefree or whatever. It's just like, yo, you know what? Like, nah, that just don't sit right with me. Like, it just, like, it was just really difficult coming out of that experience. And so, on the way back home, got into this discussion, and I know it's a critical discussion in terms of what to do with white people, right? There's a lot of debate and a lot of thought going into, like, human nature, and do certain people have different natural characteristics, natural traits, and if so, how should they be treated in a revolution, to kind of correct the ills of society as we see them today. And so, and I've had this conversation with many, many people over the years. And when I got back home, it was late. It was probably like 11:30 at night or whatever. And I was thinking through that idea about what do we do with white people? And mind you, I just left an experience where I wasn't very wild about white people, right? But I ultimately believe that people are people, right? And so anyway, I wrote this thing. It was like a stream of consciousness. I edited it a little bit. I got a little bit of feedback from some folks. So I'm actually going to read it, and it's just what I was thinking. And I probably started this document at like 2 a.m. A couple of nights ago. After getting back from that pilgrimage. So it's called, "Is There a Place for White People When Your Revolution is Won?" Those who call themselves white are to blame for the white supremacist, capitalistic, patriarchal system that's causing humanity and the world deadly harm. When diving into the gruesome details of this period in human history, one will rightly ask, how could human beings do this? The sad truth is that human beings across the planet have found it possible to reach repulsive acts of torture, rape, death, exploitation. White people, though, have been particularly capable of such acts at an unfathomable frequency and impact. So many cite a natural preference for selfishness, violence, and exploitation as part, if not all of, the root of this difference. The cause of these traits is said to be the resource scarcity on the European continent. I believe that all people, including white people, are fundamentally, i.e. naturally, the same, biologically, emotionally, cognitively, etc. I also think that all humans share a relatively small list of needs for a happy and fulfilled life. Chief among these are sustenance, security, peace, love, and belonging. Without all of these, humans will suffer to varying degrees and durations. For people who would become white, the scarcity of sustaining resources on the European continent resulted in insecurity. And I'm going to break away from the writing here and just say it also might have just been a perceived scarcity in the sense that they weren't as affluent as neighboring cultures. That wasn't in the writing. Let me go back into it. Upon exposure to people from other parts of the world and their abundance of resources, that insecurity developed into jealousy and greed. These would lead to illogical justifications to ignore the love and belonging they should feel towards their fellow humans and resort to inhumane violations of peace, especially against people of darker hues. Resmaa Menakem discusses that trauma can be passed down through subsequent generations and be seen as culture. A trauma, something that was an unnatural experience, can be internalized, passed down, and acted out and seen as culture and observed as quote unquote natural. Evidence of this exists in white supremacist rhetoric about the alleged violent nature of Black people. We know that the violence Black people do commit is rooted in centuries of inhumane and traumatic conditions imposed upon them by the white supremacist capitalistic patriarchal system. All the while, white violence on Black Americans far exceeds Black violence on the continent. Here we can begin to reframe the experience on the European continent as a traumatic experience to the either real or perceived scarcity of sustenance. This traumatic experience, passed down and acted out culturally, can be incorrectly seen as natural. If we are able to reframe their, quote, natural behaviors as a result of the trauma of sustenance scarcity, we can see that they should be capable of healing that trauma and returning to a healthy norms of human civilization and social order. I'm not advocating that Black people do any work to that end. We need to heal our own traumas and build towards the holistic societal norms that are healthy for humans and the earth that sustains us. However, I am saying that white people have a place when my revolution is complete, provided they do their work to get there. They undoubtedly have the highest mountain to climb. They must shed their false sense of superiority, confront their insecurities, and reconnect to their humanness, hopefully with abundant, genuine acts of reconciliation along the way. And they must do all of this on their own. They started this mess after all. Ironically, the survival of the concept of whiteness depends on how quickly they begin this process. We Black, brown, and indigenous people have already seen that human survival and the survival of the planet depends on our revolution. We must and we will retake the reins of civilization navigation, save the planet and the human condition. If white people don't start their revolution, they will cease to exist. The choice is theirs. So that kind of like summarizes my thoughts, at least at this moment, about what to do with white people. I know there's people who think that white people are the devil and have no place in anybody's revolution and need to be done away with, cast away, or something. I'm not sure exactly what their end game is. I tend to believe what I said in the piece, that all people are capable of the same thing, good or bad, and that we all need to heal our own traumas, heal our own insecurities, and arrive at our place in this revolution. Whew. So August was a month for sure, for multiple reasons, some of which I didn't get into here, but yeah, I'm looking forward to growth in this space. I really want to challenge myself. I know I need to decolonize my mind a great deal. I've been in corporate America for a while. I have a lot to learn. I have a lot to process, and I'm here. I'm ready for the challenge. I really am. And check me if you feel like I'm faltering on that. Like and there's gonna be times where I might, and struggle. But I can't look at this world knowing what I know and not do anything about it. I felt that way even before I had a kid. Now I got a kid, and it's just like he's looking up at me, and I can't leave the world the same way. I can't let the world be unchanged after I've been here. And it's just a matter of finding some way to do something, big or small, to fix this somehow, or to at least get us on some kind of a path towards it. So I'll wrap it up. I appreciate you listening. Oh, the song I'm rocking to right now, I'm gonna go against my own rule and pick like pick basically an artist, because my man Kenny, when we were driving down, actually, and the song came from Nova, the sister who was with us also in the carpool. She had recommended to us the song Stardust by Lava and Free Soul, and that joint is a banger, right? But then that basically got me into like a bunch of their other music, and there's a particular album that Free Soul did, and that came out earlier this month, and the first song on that album is called Promise, and that's just the joint that I'm rocking to right now. The lyrics in the verses aren't even necessarily like my favorite verses of his, but just the beat and the chorus that's just what's moving me right now. But there's so many other like tracks on that album and Lava's albums too that just are just flowing through me right now. One of them is Fertile Soil. One of them is Ankh Uja Seneb. I mean, the beats, the melodies, the messaging. I mean, this music is just hitting me right now, and I appreciate Nova and Kenny for for being in the car, for sharing the carpool with me, but also like recommending that music and put me on. So appreciate y'all for that. So anyway, you hit me up on Instagram. I'm at RealDadult, RealDadult. If you have any feedback on any prior episodes or ideas for new ones, holla at me. And until then, be safe, be well, peace.